Today we have a fireside chat with Slack CMO Bill Macaitis. On stage we have Sarah Green, who's the host of the HBR IdeaCast podcast. And we also have Bill, who is the CMO of Slack, the platform for team communication. He has a track record of leading category-defining high-growth technology companies into successful IPOs and exits, so I'm sure you have great questions for him. And prior to joining Slack, Bill was the CMO at Zendesk, where he was instrumental in the company's IPO in 2014. Prior to that, he served as SVP of online marketing and ops at Salesforce, where revenues tripled under his watch. So give a round of applause and we'll get started.
Thanks. Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I just have one emendation to what you said, which is I realized since we last talked, I added a last name. So I'm now Sarah Green Carmichael. Anyway, thank you so much for being here today. It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great to be here.
So just give me a sense around the room. Raise your hand if you have heard of Slack. I figured that would probably be the case. Now, keep your hand up or raise it again if you use Slack. Okay, wow. That's about what I figured. For those of you who may
My work here is done.
I know, we can just go home. For those of you who may have wandered in by accident or are here for other reasons, Slack is the #1 fastest growing enterprise app in history by some measures.
We think so.
Which is fantastic and impressive. Yeah. And I thought we would sort of break this into about 3 sections. So I want to start a little bit talking about marketing in a company that's growing as fast, and then get into a bit of the management piece, and then end on some sort of leadership, personal kinds of questions. Sure. So I thought I would start by talking about word of mouth marketing, because this is something that has been huge for Slack. It's big for a lot of companies at HubSpot and at this conference. And I just wonder, is there something that happens in the growth cycle where you sort of are in that early fun word of mouth stage where everyone feels like they've got their little secret thing they're telling their friends about, and then as you grow, that changes, and you don't hear people saying, oh, I've heard of this thing called Facebook, do you use it? So I'm just wondering, as we start out, are you planning for that next phase? What do you think about that? How do you fuel word of mouth without kind of killing the buzz?
Yeah.
Let's just start there.
Yeah, sure. So I definitely think word of mouth is one of those key drivers for any SaaS company. You have to have it. And I think it starts really early with a commitment to it at a company level. I think we've always thought about Slack and really just a brand as the sum of every single experience someone has. And we want them to have a great experience. We want to have a great experience when they're finding out about us, when they're trying Slack out, when they're buying it, when they have a customer support inquiry. Every single one of those experiences shapes if you're going to recommend. And I think pretty early on we made a decision that we didn't want to be, pat ourselves in the back if someone signed up with Slack or even if they renewed. The bar we wanted to hold was would they recommend us. And so I think you can have ongoing organic word of mouth growth. I think that it's an intentional strategy, and we hire much more on the product and the support side. A lot of people notice we have about 5 times as many support people than accounts people. And that's pretty non-traditional in the SaaS landscape. So we're always going to want to make sure that organic word-of-mouth growth is our primary driver. That being said, I've worked in a lot of different companies before this, and one thing I've seen is organic never goes where you want it to go. You're in Kazakhstan or something like that, and you're wait, but I want to be in Japan or I want to be in Germany. And so a lot of times we'll use advertising then to help supplement that. Advertising is a way to help get us into new segments, geos, new markets, new verticals, and hopefully establish that with a successful base so that they'll go on and continue to recommend us.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point you bring up. They're sort of being opportunistic, and seizing those opportunities as they come along, and then there's kind of trying to plan your growth. How do you think about that trade-off?
I think that you always want to just look at the aggregate market. I think there's a school of thought which says you look at all these different markets and find out how they're different and build feature sets or try to support them. And I'm not really as much of a fan of that one. I like thinking you look at all your markets and you think about how they are similar. And what are the core pain points that every single segment, every single vertical has, and still make it a simple product. Because I think that's the death of SaaS, is when you continue to add feature after feature after feature, and before you know it, one of the biggest reasons they were signing up for you was it was a nice, easy to use product, and now it's hard, and then you get disrupted from the bottom.
Yeah. So I'm also wondering, are there particular metrics that you're tracking as you're kind of trying to gauge how you're doing on some of these different measures?
Yeah, we'll track all the traditional SaaS metrics.
Okay.
So CAC payback, LTV, cost per team, all those things. But in a way, like I've kind of evolved my thoughts on this. I really look to more longer term metrics and metrics that are customer centric. So the big metrics that we look at are daily active users. Are people actually using the product and are they using it every day? We'll look at NPS or Net Promoter Score. And CSAT is another really big one, and we'll do.
So for people who are, obviously we publish a lot on NPS at Harvard Business Review, but for people who don't know, can you just give a sort of quick thumbnail of what Net Promoter is?
It's super simple. How likely are you to recommend Slack to a friend or colleague? Scale of 0 to 10. 9s and 10s are promoters, 7s and 8s are passive, 0 through 6 are detractors. So it's just a good, simple question. Like I don't know about you guys, like I hate the surveys where you have to fill out like 20 questions. Like I'll never do those. And the nice thing about NPS is it's one question, and it basically is a leading indicator for your organic growth, your organic word of mouth growth. So if you kind of have the entire company rally behind that, and you're thinking again about those experiences, not just in the product, but at every single stage, every single functional team helps influence that experience, then you can have hopefully a good NPS score, which will have good long-term organic growth.
Mm-hmm. So you've mentioned customers in a few different ways and customer centricity, and I'm wondering, in your experience, either at Slack or at your previous companies, as you think about sort of the growth curve, are you prioritizing different segments of customers or different types of customers at different times? Are you just happy sort of for whatever customers you can have? Do you want as many as possible? Sort of how do you think that through?
I think almost every SaaS company I've seen starts at the bottom. They start at VSB, then go to SMB, then go to mid-market, and start going up to enterprise. And I think Slack was similar. You know, when it started off, it was more for the smaller businesses, maybe the smaller dev teams. But it's been pretty amazing seeing how much applicable it is to all segments now, and even all geos. We work with LinkedIn, and so we'll use like their cookie and pixeling technology. So when we see visitors come to our homepage, we can see like, well, what businesses do they represent? Like what verticals, what function are they in? And it's pretty amazing. It's like, a lot of people just think Slack is about just the dev teams or just in the internet type companies. And we see it across almost every single function. Mm-hmm. It's sales, marketing, finance, support, development. We see it across all traditional industries. We have like mining companies that use Slack. We have big enterprises that use Slack. So I think we're moving up market, and as part of that, we're launching an enterprise plan that will have a lot of the features that address some of their core pain points around federation of teams, provisioning, organizational-wide reporting and metrics. But for us, it's been something that we really want to look at Slack as a solution that can address pain points for all the different segments.
Yeah. Okay, and just so my biases are out on the table, we use Slack at HBR, and we're big fans, so we're one of those people too. So I guess one of the things I'm wondering about customers though is like some customers are very expensive to retain, they're expensive to serve. At some point, I feel like every company has thought like, I just want to fire this customer, like they're just not worth it. Is that something where you have ever thought like, well, we have to make trade-offs and serve the customers that are sort of more profitable and also easier to serve and less costly to serve, as opposed to some customers that might be more high maintenance?
We've never fired a customer. But for me at least, it kind of gets back to one of the reasons I joined Slack was I was really excited to do a new go-to-market model. And we have obviously we have a ton of marketers here, right? And we've all like bowed down to the lead god before, and it's all about leads and just getting leads in. And I just thought there was a better way to do that. Mm-hmm. And I've really shifted more to customer centricity. Everything is about that customer experience. And to your question, I never liked how when a lead came in, it got routed through the lead routing machine and pinged out, and you had to talk to this person, or you know what? Oh, you're not going to make enough money. You can't talk to anyone because you're unprofitable. And it just was a really crappy experience, right? And so, and I know myself. We're I think 250 people now. But I know friends that are part of big companies and friends that are part of medium-sized companies, right? And I've used a lot of different products, and I'll recommend them. So the way we look at it is like anyone that comes in, like if you want to talk to an accounts person, you have questions, great, we'll let you do that, right? If you're an enterprise and you just want to buy self-service, or you want to add a bunch of new users, great, we'll let you do that too. It's really about like putting the decision in their hands.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a pretty flexible pricing model that actually lets people kind of end up in the right place.
Yeah, Slack took a really cool stance on kind of the freemium model, where most of the free trials I've been at least a part of have been either time-bound or user-bound or severely limited with the amount of features that you got. And Slack it's free to try, it's free for an unlimited amount of users, it's free for an unlimited amount of time. So that I think has really reduced a lot of the core friction that comes in. When you come in, you don't have to, fill out a form with your 18 fields and your cell phone number, and you're not going to get called. You can actually watch a demo of what it is.
Yeah.
You can sign up, and you
Yeah.
don't have to put in your credit card information right away.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of a different model. It's
That's
a
different.
low friction and just good experience.
Premium. Yeah. So I want to go back to something you said a moment ago, which we didn't really follow up on, but which was traditional advertising.
Yeah.
Because I think it's interesting to be here at Inbound and have someone say, like, we do a fair amount of traditional advertising.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about kind of what that does for you in a world where we hear so much about inbound marketing, content marketing, social media marketing. What do sort of traditional ads do for you?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to like finding the ideal go-to-market model. And if you look back in time, especially for B2B companies, it was always about field sales. You do your field sales is a very expensive model. You'd have to go out, you'd be doing outbound calls, and then you had this shift to inbound, which obviously everybody here knows about. And then I think even before that, a more optimized model is just word of mouth growth. But with that said, you could go out and hire a massive sales team. But I think one of the things that's unique about Slack is because it is applicable to any team, in most companies, I view advertising is kind of like another model of our sales team. It's a little bit more cost efficient, and we're kind of lucky because a lot of companies I've worked with previously, you've only been selling to one department or it's been one vertical. So a lot of times advertising, obviously the more you target, the more expensive it is and it's not as scalable. But since we have such a broad market, we can actually kind of steal from consumer type plays and we can do advertising in a very cost effective model while still getting our word out and help create that inbound demand. We're still all inbound. We don't have any outbound salespeople. We do have an accounts team, but they're not commissioned. They come and they actually stay with you for the entire life cycle of their account. They're judged on things like the net promoter score of their accounts, the customer satisfaction scores after they finish buying the process. So again, it all revolves around that buying experience. But advertising can be a key part. And one of the things I've noticed too is like as everyone has ran away from even some of the traditional forms like print or radio, the CPMs are actually pretty low, and it's
I can speak to
a great
that.
opportunity, to get into there.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I do want to ask you a bit about content marketing as well, because I know you guys have a podcast, you have a blog. How do you think of the tone of that content, and how has that tone shifted over time as the company has really grown and gotten a lot more sort of attention directed to it?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of content marketing, and I think content marketing is sometimes a little misused. There are some content marketing that is like, well, let me show you a white paper of why my company's awesome for these 10 reasons, and I don't really think that's helpful content, or at least content I would want to read or listen to. So we've always been out content that's just that fits our brand, that's fun, that's human, that's personable. And I think I've looked at content too. It's not just written content or not just videos. Like we launched our first podcast called the Slack Variety Pack. And it's pretty cool, fun, and it doesn't talk a lot about Slack. It just talks about stories about work and life. Sorry, I just got to think of that out. Stories about work and life. It's stories about inspirational things that are happening in the tech space, and it was a new way for kind of engage our customers, and that's been like an incredible success. Like it's amazing the amount of money we put into it relative to the amount of listeners that we have, and it's a great first introduction to the brand. Yeah,
it's interesting that you say that. So I was listening to some of the episodes, and you had one that was like parents describe what their children do for work. And if you work in a tech company or basically anything other than like fireman, policeman, doctor, like listening to these parents trying to describe like my kid executes and implements business. Like it was great. It was really enjoyable. It was like, I'm not sure what this has to do with Slack, but I would totally listen to another one because it's great.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it's a nice first interaction with the brand. The funny thing is they ended that and they kind of turned it on all of us and they're like, well, can you describe what Minecraft is? Because every little kid knows it intensely, and they're like, do you really know what it is? But yeah, it's been awesome. We used a company called Pacific Content. They're out of Vancouver, fantastic. They just do podcasts, that's all they do, and so they've been a key partner for us.
That's great. So as you think about the different formats you guys have available to you, how do you decide like what should be in the podcast, what should be in the blog? How do you think of that through?
I always separate content out. There's the content itself, and then there's which channel you can use it, and ideally you are using that content and you're reusing it across multiple different channels. And blog is great and blog is always be there, but I think you have to recognize too that not everyone goes to your blog, and it can't be the sole source of your content outlet. So I think a lot of ways too, I've always been an advocate of actually pushing that content more within the product itself, because everyone goes within the product. And that's something that we're thinking about, like really in product education. How do we let people know when there are new features that have launched, when there is kind of a cool piece of content, and just helping them out.
Right. And how do you do that in a way that's not just a sort of constant stream of pop-ups?
Yeah, that's not annoying. And that's always been something that's guided of our marketing, a simple rule, like don't have it be annoying and slimy.
Simple rule.
Yeah, we try to avoid some retargeting stuff or stuff where, again, you click on an ad and it sends you to that prison landing page where you just have to fill out all your information. And it's your first interaction with your brand, and I'm always amazed at how many times it's a really bad interaction. You expect that person to continue on, and then you even expect that person to recommend you. It's just, it's not how that works.
Mm-hmm. So I want to sort of segue a moment now from talking about this part of it to talking about some of the more internal company stuff. And the sort of bridge in my mind from that topic that we were just on to the new sort of place I want to go is actually a post I read on the blog, which just came out yesterday. Yeah. And you guys have joined a number of other tech companies in talking about your diversity metrics in terms of like women, how many women managers, ethnic makeup of the company. Tell me a little bit about why you felt it was important to do that and to share that information publicly on the blog.
Yeah, I think every tech company has really an obligation to understand that if there is some hidden bias that's happening in the recruiting process, and it can be a vicious cycle. You tend to get one majority group that comes in that asks people that a lot of times for all of our companies we get recommendations for new hires from the existing people. That's usually the biggest source of new hires, and it tends to be your own circles, and so it can be a pretty vicious cycle. So I think we are excited to be part of a larger industry coalition that is starting to self-report those stats, and that was something that we were really excited about. We saw that 45%, I think it was 45% of the managers at Slack were women, and 42% of the entire company reported into those women managers. So I think there's still obviously a lot of work to do when you think about the overall tech space. But that was something we felt we just had a commitment towards.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting too, because I think that when you make that public, it has kind of an interesting effect on the company itself, sort of internally. And it seems like that's something where, as you are growing so fast, I could see it being easy to just take the recommendation of Bill or George or whoever for my friend's looking for a job. Okay, great, let's hire him. And we have to hire 30 people in the next month or 2 months, whatever it is. So it seems like that's sort of and I'm wondering, what did you sort of talk to people internally that we're doing this and we're going to release this publicly? How did you?
Yeah, I think Stuart's been fantastic, and he's always thought about that, about having a diverse workplace, and not just giving people a chance that haven't just had the traditional kind of B2B background. And I think that's actually why Slack has been successful. I tell them, I'm so glad you guys were not polluted with B2B design, because anybody that's used B2B products are pretty painful for the most part.
It's sort of beige and boxy and
but he's always had that commitment, and we've always thought about ways that we can improve that. We do a lot of unconscious bias training as well for a lot of the hiring managers, and we just talk about it, make sure reporting on it, and just make sure we can have a more inclusive workforce.
So as the company has grown, I mean, is that something that's sort of relatively new? Is this part of other shifts in the company culture as the company's grown? It seems like you're always hearing about hyper-growth companies struggling to maintain their culture and transition it to sort of something else. So I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, what was interesting is we were starting to grow, and thanks to all the customers that had just this kind of crazy growth curve. And we talked about what are we most afraid of? Is it a competitor, or is it what could take us down? And we all kind of agreed it was if we lost the culture, And Slack has a very unique culture. We kind of have 6 different values that guide us, but the first 3, which is our really big ones, are the hiring values we look for are empathy, courtesy, and craftsmanship. And that's a little different. I've worked for a lot of companies too that have been killer and type A and dominate, and that's our the values come from there. So it's actually a really fun and nice group of people to work with. When you're talking to empathy, courteous people that care a lot about their work. And I think it's why you see a lot of the attention to detail. We have a little phrase too that we always think about, like painting the back of the drawer. You know, it's something like 99% of the people, when you buy a drawer set, you'll never pull it out. We'll pull out one drawer and see it's like literally the back pane painted, but we always think about that. It's part of like the craftsmanship. So it's something that we've always spent a lot of time on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm painting my house now. I'm constantly making those judgment calls. I'm not none of the backs of the drawers are painted. But so I'm wondering, you mentioned when you talk about empathy and craftsmanship and stuff like that, I cannot help but think how different that sounds than some of the other tech companies we've heard about in the news lately. And I'm wondering, you know, as you talk about that culture versus other kinds of cultures, you know, is that something that you think you'll, let me how to phrase this, is that sort of, have you worked in those other kinds of cultures that are, you said, a little more aggressive?
Yeah.
How do you personally deal with that kind of pressure? Because I think there might be people in the room who are not in the kind of empathetic culture that Slack is now, but like, what would your advice be on sort of managing the type A killer, you know, kind of overdrive work-life situation?
I think I've maintained my sanity by just always viewing everything as a learning experience. And you either see managers and you say like, hey, I like that style and I'd like to emulate that style, or you know what, I really didn't like what they did there, you know, and I'm gonna make a conscious decision not to do it. So I think, you know, that's just life. Every experience, you're gonna get curveballs and you get bad stuff that happens, but you know, it's all how you look at it.
Yeah, and is there sort of, when you think about managing other people and maintaining a culture, how do you give them advice? How do you sort of lead the people in the direction you want them to go in? I
think management's hard. It's a pain in the ass. It's hard. It's a skill set. And I think a lot of people get into management and, you know, it's a skill, and like you have to really devote yourself to it. Like your roles as a leader, as a manager radically change, right? You know, it's not about you anymore. It's about your team. You know, your success is your team's success. And I always tell my team, like, hey, I'm here to make you successful. Like, I'm here to eliminate blockers, to get you resources, to help guidance on prioritization. But I think the thing that I say to most managers, you know, is, you know, learn. Like, there's a great, like, I love this podcast, Manager Tools. They have literally like 700 podcasts on every single discipline of management, from how to run a one-on-one, to giving active feedback, to running meetings in the right amount of time. And it's just, you know, it's stuff that a lot of us just haven't learned before. But it's really important because the number one reason people quit is their manager. It's not the company sucked or their pay or it's their manager. So, you know, when you're thinking about maintaining.
And the converse is true too. People will stay for a good manager, I think, too.
Totally. So it's, I mean, and it really ties into the culture. So when we do a lot of our hiring, we don't put as much on domain expertise. We put much more on those values. You know, because I think you can always teach skills, but it's really hard to have someone change like what type of person they are.
Yep. So I want to open it up to Q&A if you guys have questions. Oh, we have microphones. Maybe walk up to the microphone.
Oh, thank you.
So we walk back to the microphone just so we can make sure that everyone can hear you because it's such a big room.
Each aisle. Yeah, there's 3.
Okay, great. Yes.
Hey, Bill, Jody Rich. I'm the CEO of People Browser Cred, and we've built influence analytics for Slack. We love it. Well done.
Excellent. Thanks.
So tell us some of the cool new features that are coming out over the next few months.
Discuss the roadmap. You know, it's funny, like I've actually had conversations with Stuart on this. I'm like, how much do we want to be we hide our entire roadmap? And
No, tell us everything.
Oh, yeah. But the cool thing is I've always wanted to work for a CEO that was like, let's just tell people the roadmap, you know, and get their feedback, because it's, again, we're customer centric. So it's kind of cool. He is aligned with that. So there are, I can tell you a couple cool things coming up. We've got group messaging or group direct messaging coming out. That's been a pain point that a lot of people have talked about. I've been betaing it on our internal version. I love it. It's great to be able to send a message to more than 2 or 3 people. We've been working on threaded replies for a while. That's a big one that, you know, we kind of have a poor man's version. If you go into a file, you can do comments, and that's kind of a threaded version, but we want to make a more elegant and beautiful system there. We've got voice calls coming out, which is something that will be really cool. You can just click on someone's name and you do a VoIP call with them. You don't need to know their phone number. That should be pretty awesome. We also have a massive, as I mentioned earlier, big enterprise product that's going to be offered up, and it's going to address a lot of the pain points of the bigger organizations. So you'll have federation of teams, all tied to an Active Directory, consolidated billing, organizational-wide reporting and analytics. So that's super exciting. And then we've been investing a lot on the platform side. We integrate with over 100 different business applications right now, but there's 400 that are literally in the queue to be integrated. And so we've hired a head of platform, April Underwood, that we're really excited about. And we just launched a add to Slack button. So it basically makes it super easy to get outside information into Slack. And that's where the real power is, right? For those that have used it, it's not just communicating with your team, it's getting all these other 53 business apps we use and getting that information in so you don't have to go back and forth.
Great, thank you.
Right. All right, let's take one from over here.
Hi, Bill.
Hey.
My name is Leandro. I'm from Brazil. I work at Geeky, which develops adaptive learning technology for high school in Brazil. And it's a very difficult market to enter, like education. Most of the schools are just starting to use technology. And I think a lot of your talk about the go-to-market is like the frictionless, right? So it's a lot of about the product, right? And one of the struggles I face there is like this alignment with the product development, markets and marketing and products. So can you share how you do it there? How you guarantee you have alignments through the roadmaps, to develop this go-to-market?
Yeah, Stuart has a great post. I definitely recommend reading it. It's We Don't Sell Saddles Here. You can just search for that, and it'll talk a lot about that. But essentially, early on, he said everyone does marketing. I came on when there were about 50 people, so at that point, Slack had started to get some good momentum. But I think the key thing is you have to view marketing as through the entire life cycle that infuses itself within the product. And you just have to be super connected with those teams.
Okay.
But yeah, go to that blog post. You'll learn a lot. It's
One
good
from
stuff.
over here.
Hi, Bill. My name is Stephanie Tackett, and I know that I probably don't look like your typical student, but I've actually gone back to school to pursue my MBA. And so my executive MBA program at Macaitis is using Slack. We've used it for the last year, and we're hoping that maybe you were here yesterday and heard about freemium, and that education organizations might be able to tap into that new trend that HubSpot started yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I did fly in last night, so I wasn't able to hear that. But we were just talking about this a couple months ago, and we've basically launched now. We're for nonprofits, like Slack is free. I think for education, it's 85% off or some ridiculously big discounts. So yeah, we're excited because I think, the pain points of Slack is, there's just so much pain out there, and it's with an avalanche of emails. I know I've wasted 2 years of my life in status update meetings. It's just, there's so much pain, and so we think Slack can help that, and we're excited to help extend into nonprofit and to EDU as well.
Well, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Of course.
And right here, you had your hand up very first, so
I know.
let me know.
Bill, wonderful to get to hear you today. My name is Patrick O'Neill. I work with a venture capital firm in San Francisco, and one of the things that I do is help marketing teams at our portfolio companies. What I'd love to hear from you about is you've worked with some amazingly fast-growing SaaS companies. What's been your kind of trick in terms of scaling out marketing teams quickly?
Work with great people and treat them well, inspire them, and a lot of them will tend to follow you. I always look for people that are hungry to learn. Online marketing, there are classes now, at least when I went to college, there weren't. It's all about just learning and having that passion. The best piece of career advice I ever got was it doesn't matter if you're employed or not, it matters if you're employable. Meaning you should always be focused on improving those skill sets. So I just look for that, hungry people that can help grow the organization. Great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hi, Bill. My name is Trish. I currently work at Startup Institute. We're based in Boston, but we have teams in Chicago, New York, Berlin, London. So Slack has been super awesome. Cool. Our alumni use it. I have a rock climbing group that uses it. Just everyone. I'm super obsessed. So I was the girl in the corner that was wooing. So just a flag.
Yes, one.
So I know that you guys have an office in San Francisco. You're in Vancouver. You're overseas. And I wanted to talk a little more about the scalability of culture and the employee experience, because you talk a lot about a customer experience, but if you don't have a really great employee experience, it doesn't really lend itself to the customers feeling that joy. Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little more about what you guys do, because having a ping pong table doesn't really matter if you're trying to get that stuff, the culture and motivation going within a company.
Yeah, I think that I think one of the most important things to do is one, just understand like what is your mission and what are your values. Like our missions is to make people's working life simpler, more pleasant, and more productive. But we actually use that mission to say both externally towards the customers and internally facing too. Like how can I make the meeting notes in advance for the agenda so that when people come to my meeting, like they have a good experience, that I show up on time, that I don't waste their time. And so we're constantly thinking about how do we recognize people that are really living the mission within Slack, the employees that show when they're courteous, that show the teamwork, that show the craftsmanship. And I think just spending a lot of time on it, we do a lot of management training. Again, like we kind of thought like that's the one thing that could really derail us. And so we just put a lot of time and energy into it. We talked a lot about it in the executive staff meetings, and we're constantly talking with the overall company on making sure we understand it. We use Culture Amp too. We do periodic surveys to understand what is the sentiment within the company, where do we have problems, and how can we improve it. Great, thanks.
Great. Back over here.
Hi, Bill. My name's Andrea. I work for a software company out of Boulder. And we were recently, Boulder, Colorado, for all of those of you who don't know what Boulder is. And I work for a software company that was recently acquired, so we're like really actively growing. Yeah. And I lead our marketing team. And I'm curious how you actually structure your marketing team. Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, sure. Love Boulder, great city. I always look at it as a couple tiers when you grow out your teams. So the first teams that I'll traditionally build out are the analytics and ops teams, because I just think you have to build out that marketing tech stack. There's so many good pieces of technology now, and you want to make sure that you've got that out. You can report on the right information. I'll usually then move into like content marketing, because again, I think that's just such an ongoing good source of inbound growth. We'll usually outsource PR to start with, and then at some point you'll start to bring that in-house. And then I'll build the advertising team, so you can start to do some outbound advertising and arbitraging and all that fun stuff. And then after that, I mean, you go different levels down. You start to bring PR in-house. You'll start to think about international and some of those marketing managers that come in. You're going to start to think about field marketing, customer delight are teams that I've brought in, and then eventually you can even bring in like, analyst relations. You can start to bring in more product marketing that's going to do a lot of sales enablement, the positioning, the pricing, the packaging. So, I mean, those are kind of the 8 or 9 teams I look at, and it really just kind of depends on each company, like what your strengths are.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Right here.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for coming. I'm Anna Nelson-Feeney. I'm a consultant from Slalom Consulting, and I wanted to get back to a point that you had made about management and managing your people.
Yeah.
So how do you, especially given that it's still a growing company, and sometimes there may be roadblocks that are just inevitable, how do you keep your folks engaged, feeling like they have opportunities, and how do you manage employee dissatisfaction?
It's a pretty broad question. I mean, some of the stuff I do is I try not to give specific actions or directions to people. In other words, like tell them the goal that you're trying to solve and empower them with the strategy to help execute on that. Again, view yourself as a manager as you're there to just make them successful. And so it's almost like they are my customers, and how am I doing to help them out? I think regular one-on-ones are huge. Every week, like you have to be having a one-on-one with your boss or the people that report to you. And then overall, just talking to them a lot, and whether it's the culture amp or just spending a lot of time knowing that that's your job as a manager, is to create a great workplace where people can do the best work of their life.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Over here.
Hi, I'm Melissa. I work at a software company locally in Cambridge. And I was listening to another podcast on Slack, and one of you guys mentioned that adoption in the organization is really key to your guys' success. And you said something that was really surprising. Teams with 85% adoption or 80% something really high like that, that's not good enough for Slack to be successful there. And you really need 100% in order for Slack to work. So I'm curious how you use marketing to facilitate that cultural change. Because you're doing something huge, getting people away from email. I know most of you guys in the room use Slack, but it's still really entrenched a lot of other places. So how do you use marketing to facilitate a cultural shift?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when I talked about that stat, essentially what happens is the average team size is 20 people. And so, all it takes is 1 or 2 people to be the holdouts of like, I don't want to do this, right? And it can subterfuge, a litless end of these collaboration tools that have launched and everyone's promised to end email and everything's going to be rosy. So I think what I was trying to say here is that you have to have everyone, the bar has to be really hard. It has to be really high. It's got to be a great experience. It's why we try to support every single device, including Windows phones, which we just kind of released some new functionality for. Browser, desktop, iPad, like whatever version it is, because we have to have a great experience. And then again, like I think marketing is part of that experience. It's a huge part. Like most people's first touches with your brand are either going to be via sales, advertising, marketing, a lot of times customer support. I used to work with Zendesk, and I would see like you would constantly have people that would be really angry and have an issue, but if they were addressed quickly and you solve their issue and you empower the customer support agent to deal with it, they would be a fan of yours, right? And I'm having a horrible experience with an unnamed company. I'm not going to rat them out right now. But it's been like 2 months without a washing machine and having a kid. That's just a bad experience, right? And I'm like pulling my hair out. I'm like, why won't you just help me? But it makes a big difference. And so I think like just having a really high bar and just having it all be around that experience. Hopefully they have a good experience. And if they have a good experience, they're probably going to recommend you. And then all the CAC payback, all your growth stats are going to be much better.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have about maybe like 5 to 8 minutes left, so I want to try to get through as many other questions as possible. So if you're going to ask a question, please try to be concise. Over here.
I'll be rapid. Speed lightning questions.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and I work for a marketing agency in San Francisco, and I'm an aspiring CMO. And so we've talked a lot about management today and how important building out those teams are, but what advice do you have for aspiring marketing leaders?
Great question.
Don't try to get promoted. Just provide value and be a good teammate.
Okay, but I have to say, I know I said to be concise, but sometimes you have to be a squeaky wheel, right? I mean, you can't just assume that people will see. You have to say, like, okay, I've been here, I've been doing this, I've been providing this.
Well, if you use Slack, it's a meritocracy. Well, great work will rise to the top. I don't know. I mean, constantly learn, provide value, and just, don't be afraid to try new things. If you want to be CMO, it's a lot of different disciplines underneath that. So I think it's good to move to different teams, do tours of duty, and learn as much as you can, get mentors, and just try to do the best job you can.
Okay. Thank you. Right here.
Hi. Really quick, how do you know when to outsource and when to hire within? You mentioned some of your contracted companies as well as the fact that you're growing so quickly, and I'm hoping to differentiate between when it's important to outsource.
Yeah, we use a lot of ad agencies right now. We've outsourced PR. We just started to bring that function in-house, but we still have an outsourced component to it. I think that's just a function of your cash situation, how quickly you're growing, what are your overall metrics. But I've always been like, build or buy. It's more like if it's your core competency, build it. If it's not, outsource it.
I want to take another one here because you guys had a long line in the middle.
Hi, Bill. Nice to meet you. My name's Leah. I work for a marketing company that focuses with SaaS companies. And there's a tremendous difference between marketing, inbound marketing, the traditional side, and then SaaS-focused inbound marketing. Yeah. And I'm curious to see if you could explain a little further in. So for Slack, I've noticed that you're very well aware of the different stages of the funnel: awareness, consideration, and decision. Mm-hmm. And your blogs focus more on consideration and decision stage. So if you could expand on how you use the awareness stage content, because you said that you're a high believer in content, and I've spoken with a lot of SaaS business owners who believe that there's really not a place for that. When you have a broad client base, there's not a place for lead gen awareness stage content. And where do you use that in Slack, and how do you, because I know you said word of mouth is huge, but how do you use content in the awareness stage lead generation type of content?
The Slack Write-It Pack is probably the best example of super, super high top of funnel content that literally,
that's the podcast.
That does not talk about Slack at all, or we don't go and we don't really say like, here are the features or why you should buy it. And I'll give another example. When I was at Zendesk, we did this piece of content, top 10 hiring interview questions for customer support managers. And it took like an hour to make. We had no idea. It didn't mention Zendesk at all, just like, here's the interview questions. It ended up being like one of our #1 sources of content. It was something like 100,000 visits a month on it, because you had all these customer support managers that were just like, I've never interviewed anyone before, I have no idea what to ask them, and they would search, they would see that content, they would start to see the other content associated with their brand and slowly work their way through. So it totally works, but it is long term. It's a pain in the ass to make. You're not gonna get the results right away, and you gotta have some management fortitude that you believe in the long run to do it.
Right. Thank you.
Over
Hi.
here.
Thank you guys very much for doing this. Really much appreciated. Brian Maloney. I work at Resilient Systems, a cybersecurity platform in Cambridge. Question for you. You were talking earlier more about the ability when you're in a B2C market to do things that are sort of more human touch, more affordably. Our target audience is really like the C-level CISOs, CTOs. How do we keep that sort of appearance, that human touch, that not just driving facts and scary things at you, to be a real brand with people behind it when we are going true B2B and to a C-level type of person?
So can I know you weren't asking me, and
Yeah,
I do want
take
to hear
it.
your answer, but
Great.
our audience is very much also the C-level at HBR, and something that I just always think about as I hit my mic is they're people too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yes, tell me I want to hear what you have to say too.
Yeah, I mean, I was
Sorry.
no, I was going to say something similar. I mean, they have in a lot of ways it's the same core pain points, and I think a lot of times too, that's where advertising come in. That's super hyper targeting that level there to get in front of them. But I think you want to make sure you're providing valuable information to them and that they have a good experience and they talk to you. But I think a lot of it too is disrupting the go-to-market model. Slack is historically we've gone bottoms up. We're starting to see the opposite now. We're starting to see CEOs come to us and say, hey, I want to deploy this to 50,000 people, and how do I do it? So there's different tactics for each.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have maybe time for 2 more questions. Okay, over here.
Hi, Bill. My name is Isabella. I'm a marketing manager for a repricing company. We're also a SaaS. I just wanted to hear your take on what you say to people who, leaders, not necessarily marketers of companies, who say that there's no value in really word-of-mouth marketing because you can't measure it. That residual value that you see, for example, a lot of our traffic is direct, and it's like, where is that coming from? They obviously heard from us somewhere else. What do you say to people who don't value word-of-mouth marketing because it's so intangible?
I would say you can measure it. I'd say start measuring your NPS, and I would ask all of your CEOs, the top 3 reasons you're getting recommended and the top 3 reasons you aren't. And I'm guessing 90% don't, and it's probably something that should scare them, and everyone should know that.
Right here in the middle.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I work for a SaaS company that focuses on the construction and engineering segments. Yeah. And we hear a lot about your successes from word of mouth, but it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that the very nature of sharing and inviting people into your Slack account is it's built-in viral feature in your product. So I'd like to know what percentage of your word-of-mouth growth do you attribute to that? And then secondly, really quickly, you said you only have inbound sales. What % of your marketing is dedicated to upgrading your free users into your enterprise users?
I don't know. I mean, we don't really look at it as, we just try to look at everything like just provide a better experience and provide a better experience throughout the entire funnel. I'm sorry, what was the first part of your question again?
The first part was, do you think that the ability to invite people into
the viral.
Does that attribute to your word of mouth or the viral?
It does in a little bit. Yes and no. When you invite team members, that's going to help out. But I think we're a little bit different in that it's, you're limited to the amount of people within that team. So I think at the end of the day, those people are not going to invite someone else unless they like it or they feel there's value out of it. So again, I still think that it's the great experience that drives that growth. We've intentionally have not tried to do growth hacks. We don't ask you to give us your address book and inadvertently hit OK and 1,000 emails get sent out. Okay. We've just been about the experience.
Okay, great.
So
thank you.
We have to wrap up, but I want to ask you just one final question to sort of close it out here. A lot of marketers in the room. What do you think is sort of the biggest challenge in marketing today, and how would you suggest that we solve it?
I think the biggest challenge, one, I love marketers. Yeah. I think the biggest challenge is we artificially get put on bad short-term metrics around leads, pipeline, and it forces us to do a lot of bad things. You know what they are, to your customers. And And I think that it's a inaccurate view to think that marketing is the sole driver of growth. We're a part of it, but I think there's a better way to do it. It's a longer term view. It's a customer centric view, and it's going to help your company grow and scale for the long run.
Okay, great. Thank you all for your great questions, and thank you, Bill.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.